to All Things Funny Chat with me, Naomi Gale, the show, the podcast, the chat where we get so far inside, deeply into our vaginas, we question whether we'll ever return to civilization ever again. So it's been a while since a podcast episode has come out, and this podcast has evolved over many years. I've been doing this podcast for many years, and I get super frustrated with myself that I don't have consistency with it. So if you've been following along, then you'll know that I sold my house and its contents, everything in it. And we moved into a van, which we are traveling around the world in. I'm currently sitting in Morocco and I am in a van, if I hadn't mentioned. So recording audio with 3 children, a cat, a dog, a husband, in a van that's 7.5 meters long and 4 meters wide is not exactly possible very easily. So I've decided to just commit to, finding places and spaces where I can record this podcast. I've got a mic that I can just have on me, like a lapel mic, and there's going to be noise and there's going to be wind, and maybe you can hear the waves because I'm looking out at the sea. And it's going to be that really beautiful finished but kind of sometimes messy finish, And so I really want to commit back to the podcast as my main form of communication alongside Substack, and then sharing that on my Pinterest. So I am repeatedly done with social media, but there is a point now where I've realized that I really have to be done with social media if I want to be able to function as a human being in this world. I also have spent a lot of time really thinking about what this work looks like for me moving forward that would be sustainable and really allow me to share what's coming up and what's needed for this work, but in a way that isn't censored, completely and utterly isn't censored, and doesn't mean that I repeatedly fall into the abyss of burnout, because burnout from trying to post online, or burnout because I'm censored, or burnout because of projections. So being on the podcast and sharing from here and being on Substack, it does really allow me to be in more of a space that feels nourishing to me and tender and necessary. So I had guests on this podcast, and there are actually a couple of episodes that I recorded with a guest in person that haven't been shared. I reached out to some guests, and then there was a day when I was going to record with a guest, and I just completely and utterly lost myself within that space of having to be somewhere at a certain time and record something with somebody else and hold their stories within that. So I've made the choice to pause guests for now and focus on just sharing on this podcast and sharing the stories that need to be shared, but from the perspective of the work that's been done, because there has been a lot of work that's been done in this space. When I talk about this space, I mean like the space of holding women who have already stepped into the work that I suppose I have curated, and curated through working with many crones over the years who have the gift of a lot of wisdom. And a lot of those women have done the work for the women that are yet to start to unravel into what it means to be truly themselves in wherever they are in their journeys. So we're in this year of 2026, right? And it's like, I don't know, I just know that we're so done with the fixing and the solutions in 2026, right? So everyone's been talking about this year of the fire horse, and this year of like, okay, we get it, we know it, but how do we integrate our knowledge? So how do we find containers for our knowledge? How, do others exist in this knowledge? And where does this community exist? Where does this fucking community exist for women to be with other women who also totally get it? We don't want another, what someone would call a download. We don't really want that. I mean, yes, they're going to be in existence, but what we really want is not these downloads, not this book, not this knowledge necessarily that's going to tell us something. We want to be held in where we're at. And so I am also still looking for that community. I tried to form that community when I was in Margate, And it was so far removed from the community that I really wanted and really needed for myself. I found that many people didn't have the integration capacity. The knowledge perhaps existed, but the true essence of living through that knowledge did not exist. And so for my own safety, I had to find my way, to find space and time to understand my own needs. And now I'm like, okay, what does community look like? We traveled in the van to Portugal to a community, and they'd formed this beautiful community space. But then out of the 10 of them, 6 of them had left within 2 years. Why? I don't know. Where were the egos within it? Whose ego was, maybe a problem for others within it? How can 6 people leave out of 10? And then it had been now it's currently going through court, where the 6 people are demanding their money back that they put into the land, and they're looking for like a lot of money. We're talking like over £1 million. So then the only option perhaps for them in that community is to sell the land and start again somewhere. And so it's just listening to these stories, it's really fascinating to witness how others are trying to find community. And I see it in the homeschooling groups on Facebook, and everybody's trying to find this community, this utopia, but it's not happening. And I'm not sure the answer to that, but there's something happening for sure around it. So I'm really wanting to talk about, the women that have come before, but obviously I'm not going to talk about specific women that have come before, but I want to talk about the women who exist in this world right now and what we're trying to navigate as women. And I'm going to speak to this outside of the current crisis that exists for many, because there are many still trying to literally just survive. As I, share this podcast, we know that the Iran war has begun, and we're still living in a time of complete and utter, it's just, there's no words to describe it. So I want to talk to this, acknowledging that, and that we're holding it all within where we're at. So I want to talk about a client profile that's a completely fictitious client. And we're going to sort of go through what's coming up for her. And then we're going to really see how she could integrate what's coming up for her. So we're not here to fix, and we're not here to do anything more than simply allow for her to be heard in this space. And perhaps within it, this woman that we're going to talk about may relate to you. And we can then see what comes up for you within that. So we're going to explore this over the course of the episodes coming forward, and I'm going to just see how I roll with that. So we're going to talk about Sofia. I wanted to specifically spell Sofia as Sofia. And Sofia has done everything by society standards, and right, I use in bunny ears, by society standards, because she had the right education, and she's done the right thing with her career, and she has the right man, and now she has 2 children. And after these 2 children, later on, as time has moved on, she sort of hoped that and assumed that life would soften. So she imagined that once this youngest child had started school, that there would be space again, like breathing room for her to return to herself. This is super common, right? It's like, I've had the children and now I'm going to return back to some kind of normality that might exist for me pre-children. Not that we're going back to pre-children, because to go back pre-children is to ignore moving into the mother archetype completely. We're no longer the maiden, we're the mother, right? But at the same time, it's this acknowledgement that Sofia felt like there would be more time and space for her. So instead of that, instead of feeling like I'll return to myself, feeling more alive, she started to feel that, actually she doesn't feel alive. In fact, then she starts questioning actually whether she's ever felt that aliveness, that joy, that passion ever before, because now she's looking back retrospectively at her whole life towards this point, towards having children, and she can perhaps start to feel the joy and passion that her children have for life, and see that life has moved on, and see that she's hit her 40s, and she's like, but I don't know if I've ever felt that aliveness before, and I want that aliveness. Oh, but maybe I did, but maybe I didn't, and I don't know. It's all merging because a lot changes with the structure, neurology-wise, of our brains when we move into motherhood, just like adolescence. And so it's hard to even assess where we're at. So in many respects, Sofia is just one of those overachievers, and we're going to talk about perhaps why that might be. She has a really well-paid job, and she earns more than her husband, which is totally accepted within the household, but she's very aware that she is the main, what we would call, breadwinner. She's like a meetings gal. She runs the household, she runs the meetings, but she then runs the household, is what I mean to say. So she runs the meetings at work, she runs the household at home, and she runs all of the logistics, like school logistics, after school clubs. Oh, and then there's, of course, like birthday presents, and then there's the WhatsApp groups, and then there's the appointments, you know. Oh, don't forget the yearly dentist appointment. Who's putting that in the calendar? You know, she has what we would always say is the mother load. But she's not drowning. She's absolutely not drowning. I mean, she's functioning just fine. Just fine. But then there's this like, you know, like kind of this dissatisfaction that she just doesn't really want to talk about. And this is the crux of it, right? She has a dissatisfaction. The world is on fire. She doesn't want to talk about the dissatisfaction because look at her life. She has 2 children, a house, a well-paid job, a husband. Why should she be dissatisfied? Look at everything that she has. So she doesn't talk about the dissatisfaction. So then, of course, she has her mother. I say, of course, some of us are motherless mothers. She isn't a motherless mother. She has her mother, and her mother calls often. So she has a mother who loves the children, her children, really deeply. And the grandchildren just have this really beautiful, soft place with her mother. However, with Sofia, this love has always been conditional. So, you know, it's like the advice is disguised as care, correction is disguised as concern. Also, things might be said like, you're always doing too much, or you should be grateful, or I have to do it all. And so Sofia knows, like, she's done the work. She's like, I know better than to bring up my inner life with my mother. The end. We just don't go there. Sofia has really, really great friends as well. Great friends. They go to dinners. Sometimes she has school gates chats. Some of the friends are at the school gates. And sometimes even she goes away for a weekend. They're those kind of women. But the conversations will always be, and they will always orbit around familiarity, the familiar planets of work stress maybe, children, holidays. Maybe she's renovating her house alongside others, or she's just renovated her house and then they're all talking about renovations, or there's always work to be done on a house. And sometimes she might talk about her pelvic floor after birth with the friends because her children are now 4 and 7. So they're a little bit older, but it's not far removed to still talk about pelvic floor life. What Sofia does not say to her friends is, I don't enjoy, or I don't know how to actually enjoy my life because there is nothing wrong. They don't have those conversations with Sofia, and she doesn't bring it up with her friends. So this is then what happens is that when nothing is wrong, this dissatisfaction will become embarrassing. Perhaps there's even shame around it. And also, let's not forget that's the message from her mother, right? The mother is saying, I have to do it all and you should be grateful. So she sits with that message of her friends don't bring up these conversations. Her mother says that she should be accepting of everything. Look at her life, the world is on fire. So she just sits in that. So then the other thing, and the reason why she probably was triggered to come and speak to me about this, let's just say, this is why. This is what happens. Women won't come to work with somebody to experience something particular within the space that this is without there being a trigger. Because just being dissatisfied with your life and not wanting to say it is not enough to come and work with somebody like me with the vagina. Now I speak about this now, and I'm doing these client profiles now and seeing what comes from this, because I'm no longer working in person with women, and I'm no longer working as a one-to-one with women. It's not something that I am doing right now. I am focusing my attention on a really beautiful journey that I have created for women, where they do have access, if somebody buys the journey, follows the journey, which is really accessible and is not telling you to do anything more than exist in your life and holding you in that container with some tools that are necessary to do so. There is option to have a one-to-one chat with me when the woman has done some of that work within that container that exists there for them. I'm also focusing on doing this podcast. And I'm also focusing on writing another book, which is specifically focused around this life, this Namestia life that I've created. If you've not heard of Namestia, it's a brand that my husband and I have developed. I wouldn't actually call it a brand, it's a lifestyle. I don't know what we would call it. It's just a corner of our internet where we're talking about what it means to exist in this world. Him as a man in his mental health, and me as a woman navigating this, and us as parents with 3 children. So within Namestia, a book will be coming out around tending to mothers in 2026. And then I'm also going to be doing a master's this year on folklore and women's stories and the gender perceptions that exist as a result from stories and narrative. So a lot of that is going to be integrated. So to work with me, it will be specifically not on a one-to-one within a one-to-one outside of doing this journey, navigating this journey, and coming to me as a one-to-one. So, and that's available as a link if you're interested to know more. So sex with her husband. This was the trigger for her to come and see and talk about this work. It's fine. Sex is fine. It's predictable, right? It's efficient, and they still do it. So kudos to them. They have a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old. They've been together for about 12 years coming up, and they still have sex, right? But Sofia sometimes notices, well, something that she just doesn't really want to name so much with others, and hasn't really talked about it as much with her husband. But the husband is aware, and that's why she's come to see me. But there is pain. And sometimes she just wants to wait for sex to finish, and sometimes she wonders if this is simply what sex actually has to be, because she's now 40 and she's had 2 children, and no one around her is saying anything otherwise. No one else is saying that sex is monotonous, boring, or even painful. So quietly, Sofia over the years has been reading the self-help books. She does loves the podcast on healing. She loves books about nervous systems and childhood wounds, because she's been through a lot of wounding herself with her parents. She's been to a women's circle, and she really does have the language now. She can see the language that needs to be used and utilized, and she can see where the challenge exists in her life. And she also understands things like her boundaries, her somatic awareness, her attachment styles, and she can totally see her mother wounding, and she has dealt with that in counselling. And the counselling went on for a while, and she feels there's nowhere else to go with it. She's done it. But yet, she still knows that the knowledge exists. But what is interesting is that it's just there. It's accurate. She understands it, but it's not used in any particular way. So Sofia is not in any level of crisis, right? It's just, this is her life, and it's absolutely fine. However, she is in, right now, this moment that she is in, hence why she is here, is that she's in integration pressure. So what she has is this life, but she hasn't actually integrated everything that she is aware of. So she's feeling the pressure of that. And this container that exists now, and the reason why it's probably coming out now is because the children are slightly older, time has opened up, they are at school. What time hasn't opened up is the joy and pleasure that she was hoping for. What time has opened up is integration pressure. So the question rising is not, okay, how do I fix my life? Because nothing's bad, right? It's more dangerous than that for her, in fact, because as a 40-year-old, if you're not going to start tending to this is where shit can happen later down the line. So the question is, if I already know all this information, why am I not living differently? It's 2026 life. That's what this is. Sofia does not need more information. She just needs the places where her knowledge becomes lived experience. So places where women speak about desire, resentment, motherhood, power, money, pleasure, not therapy, not coaching. And that's why she's come to this space, because she is aware that this space is not coaching, it's not therapy, it's not fully woo, but it's not fully psychotherapy because I'm not a psychotherapist, and it's not counselling because I'm not a counsellor, and she's already done all that shit anyway. What she really needs is reality. So she needs an environment, a space where women are no longer pretending that their lives are just fine because they're functioning, what she needs, right, is to be out of the grips of the patriarchal pressure that is here for everybody and that exists for everybody, and move into those who can see it all. Nothing to change, nothing to do, just the acknowledgement of it. And that's because those people too have read the self-help books, done the therapy, love a chai latte on a Friday, on the school runs, and are aware that there is something more. She needs to find those spaces, right? And have those conversations, not necessarily talking specifically about pain during sex, but definitely more real world conversations, no level, surface level. And Sofia is done with surface level. She knows the world is on fire. She knows the shit that exists. She doesn't want that anymore to be a surface level conversation over her chai latte. And that is the strange thing around this year, right? Because everyone is talking about healing, but very few people are talking about where women actually live in this healing together. Like, where does that happen? And we're not talking about workshops anymore. We're not talking about the webinars anymore. We're talking about like actual communities, so referring back to what I was talking about at the beginning. So where does this kind of space exist? That's why a lot of women find themselves in the space that I created and would find themselves able to talk about things that they hadn't spoken about before. That little space, that little cabin in the bottom of my garden was that community space for them while they were working with me. So what we're actually looking for is the kind of changes now that she could sort of address. Like, how does Sofia integrate this? Like, you know, how do you actually make changes and that exist for how you mother, how you work within this system, how you rest and how you have sex? Because Sofia isn't actually looking for the answers to those things. She doesn't want to fuck. She's at like full capacity, guys. Like she's having to remember like when to make the dentist appointment. She doesn't want another fucking thing to change. She doesn't want another fucking thing to do. She can't just rest either. She wants just to be able to see the evidence, right? And she's looking for the evidence to see what actually works. She doesn't want the answers. She wants the evidence. And she wants to see another way of how living in this adulthood in her 40s actually exists without having to do major upheaval. She doesn't want to sell her life and live in a van and travel to Morocco, let's just say. So this is not like for her, how do I improve my life, but how do women actually like me gather when they're done pretending, right? We're done pretending. So how do they actually like gather? Where are these women gathering? So let's think about what she actually needs moving forward. So she needs an environment, which we've just spoken about, that can allow her to have gentle shifts where there will not be this one linear journey, okay, for her. What she absolutely needs is to find herself not ending up in the same cycles and the same sadness, because otherwise, you know, it will just feel the same as before. So if she listens to her little small voice rising, asking for more without regret of asking for more, that's when she will find herself moving and out of these sad cycles that she's in, that she doesn't want to name. So if she was with me and we were working together, these are some of the things that she would be integrating and acknowledging and taking time. First of all, a container to hear what she's speaking to. That's important. And just to listen and just to witness. That's super important. So if you resonate with Sofia, know that I am totally resonating with you and listening to exactly where you're at. First, she would need to acknowledge what deep tending and mothering would look like for her, for Sofia. What does it actually look like for her? Not self-care, not workshops, not yoga trips, just not labeling it as that. What does it look like for her? What does that deep tending look like? And how could she integrate that into her daily life that already exists because it's already filled to the brim? What does deep tending to her look like, even though her life is already filled? She needs to start to address the pain within the vagina, because that will allow her to tend back to what this real beautiful life would look like for her. She needs to address that pain, because that pain will either get worse, it might go away, or it will simply just resonate with her for her whole life at that level. So she won't enjoy pleasure in sex. If you're not getting pleasure during sex, then you're not necessarily feeling the pleasures of life. Not that sex is the epitome of it, but if there's pain within the vagina, what we often say is that there's pain elsewhere within your life. So the vagina is asking her to speak to her vagina, then to speak through that means to work with her breath and tools and tender touch, not sex. Sex will not resolve this pain. Sex will work with this pain and enable her to start finding freedom from the pain over time, but she needs to understand how to tend to her vagina first and hear what her vagina has to say. The information from this, her body, her fascia, will be read by her and will be translated for her, so she can then translate it to her husband, and then he can tend to the pain during sex and acknowledge it alongside her. And then this information lives inside her and then will be worked with by him during those moments and for her outside of those moments. So when she starts to notice what's coming up for her within her vagina, it becomes this ripple effect, because then she might start to notice the pace that exists for her during sex maybe, and then during sensations of the pain, and then what pace looks like for her in her home, and her home being her internal home and her external home. So by addressing this gently, the pace that exists for her with subtle, small, tiny shifts, she will start to understand the wiring of her nervous system and her nervous system ladder, which I speak to within my journey that I have. And then she will understand her wiring. And this wiring that she has will be understood over the course of weeks or months. And that gentle unraveling from the wiring will mean that she will be able to align with her overall needs. So she will then slowly find the women as a result of this to speak to the language of discomfort in 2026, and aligning those conversations more with what's arising for her and feeling out the friendships that nourish her in her 40s will allow her to continue to evolve into who she truly is and what she truly wants, and speak to what feels unsatisfactory in her life and in life in general, in the world. When she begins to acknowledge these cycles that she goes through with the Great Mother and her seasons of enjoying the hustle, the push, the busyness of life and the slower pace of life, she will again start to see how her nervous system is wired and how she is wired alongside the Great Mother, and how she can be tended to by the Great Mother and mothered by the Great Mother and mothered by herself, so that she can start to feel more mothered, and she will enable herself to return to more holding through the tools that she has accumulated over the years, and be able to integrate those tools into her every day, not as an extra thing. So, for example, it might be that she decides to do the journey that exists on my website, and then she does some vaginal steaming, which she already had heard about, but she'd always wanted to try. And she's like, oh, that feels so good because that's only 20 minutes. It feels really raw, really vulnerable, really honest, really beautiful. I now know how to vaginal steam. I only need to do it 3 times a month. Or she might be like, I want to do that, but I also want to really understand my nervous system. So I'm unraveling through my nervous system ladder, and I really understand how my nervous system is wired, and I really understand how my cycles work alongside my nervous system and what my nervous system truly needs in order to tend to myself and mother myself and be able to fill my cup up with more joy and pleasure outside of just being the main breadwinner, the one with a mediocre relationship with her mother and the mediocre relationship with herself because of everything else that interacts around her. So there are just those little tools that will help her to just start to understand what she's actually looking for. So that's just some of the ideas and some of the ways that Sofia and I would have worked together. And this is Sofia, a profile of her, this fictitious character that isn't really fictitious in many sense, because she will resonate with somebody listening to this. So we're going to leave it there. I'm going to remind again that if you want to work with me and you want to explore this kind of work that Sofia is starting to explore, then you can find my offerings on my website. There's my book, In Your Vagina Lies the Key to Your Happiness. It's available on Amazon, but you have to click books first in the top search bar, then type In Your Vagina Lies the Key to Your Happiness. Otherwise it won't come up because it's still hidden from everybody. Or you can join my journey, which enables you to utilize some of the tools that I work with and support women with over the last decade. These are tried and tested tools. You'll learn how to tend to your vagina, the fascia within it. You'll learn to understand how you can unravel into the everyday. You'll understand some of those things that we've spoken about. You can also find me on Substack under Naomi Gale. I've got an invitation, which is where this will be shared primarily. And you can find me with all things sharing about our van life on Nemestia. I so look forward to hearing any thoughts, any experiences that you want to quietly share with friends or family members or somebody who gets it. I really encourage people to just start talking about what's resonating with them in 2026. And yeah, if you have any questions about that journey that's available, then feel free to send an email. And next time we'll explore another profile from this, and maybe some other kind of offshoots from, maybe what other challenges can come up that we've spoken about within Sofia's journey to this point, such as, why women in their 40s know so much and live so little of it. Or maybe we could talk about, how many women quietly accept mediocre or painful sex. Or maybe we could talk about, the fact that the community is collapsing and why women feel alone despite a full social calendar. Sending so much love.